The spring of 1999 was a time of excitement and anticipation for high school seniors all across the country, but for Emily Davis, it was more than just a rite of passage. It was the culmination of years of hard work, dedication, and dreams. At 18 years old, she was the picture of youthful optimism. Emily had always been a bright, outgoing girl, with a passion for life and a smile that could light up any room. That Friday night, she was filled with a sense of freedom and joy, ready to celebrate her final moments of adolescence before stepping into adulthood. Her friends called her the life of the party, and she had every intention of making this prom night one she would never forget. Emily had spent weeks preparing for this night. She had found the perfect dress, a shimmering silver gown with delicate lace details that glistened in the light. Her long, auburn hair was styled in soft waves, and her makeup was flawless, accentuating her striking green eyes. She even had the perfect pair of shoes, sparkly, yet comfortable enough for hours of dancing. As her mom snapped photos of her before she left, Emily beamed with joy, her excitement palpable. She knew this night was going to be something magical. Little did anyone know, it would be her last. Her date, Michael, was a close friend she had known since elementary school. They weren't romantically involved, but their friendship had always been strong. He was the one who picked her up that night in his black Jeep Cherokee. They were headed to the local venue, a grand ballroom that had been decorated to perfection for the occasion. As Emily slid into the passenger seat of the car, she waved goodbye to her parents, promising to be home by midnight. She felt safe, surrounded by the familiar, and everything felt like it was going according to plan. Yet, something seemed off in the air, though Emily couldn't quite place it. The evening began smoothly. Emily and Michael arrived at the ballroom, greeted by friends and classmates. The music, the laughter, the glittering lights, all of it was what they had envisioned for the perfect night. But by the time the clock struck 10:30 p.m., something began to feel strange. Emily excused herself from the dance floor to step outside for some fresh air. It was then that she spoke to her best friend, Sarah, on the phone, laughing about how beautiful everything looked. "I'll be home soon," Emily said with a soft chuckle. "Just need a moment to breathe." That was the last time Sarah would hear her voice. After the phone call, Emily vanished without a trace. Michael, who had been mingling with some of their other friends inside the venue, suddenly noticed she wasn't around. He stepped outside, but Emily was nowhere to be found. He checked her car, assuming she had gone to sit there for a while, but the car was empty. He called her cell phone, but there was no answer. Panic set in when he realized that she had vanished into thin air. The last place anyone had seen her was near the back parking lot, and no one had witnessed her leaving the venue. The only thing left was the eerie silence of the night, broken only by the hum of distant streetlights. Minutes turned to hours, and still, there was no sign of Emily. The police were called, but the investigation turned up nothing. The only piece of evidence they had was her car, parked at the venue, with the engine still running. It was as though she had stepped out of her car and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind no traces of where she had gone. The entire town was left in shock, and Emily's family was plunged into an agonizing nightmare. Days turned to weeks, but Emily was never found. What happened to her that night, and why was she never seen again? Emily's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through her family. Her parents, Rebecca and James Davis, were thrown into a storm of disbelief and anguish. Rebecca, who had spent her entire life nurturing Emily and watching her grow into a young woman, couldn't understand how her daughter could vanish so completely. She would wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the empty bedroom, half expecting Emily to be there, laughing about the prom. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every visit from law enforcement left her heart sinking further into despair. The bright, hopeful future she had envisioned for her daughter seemed to slip further and further out of reach. James, a stoic man by nature, found it difficult to express his emotions, but his grief was no less profound. He began to withdraw into himself, pacing the house at night, searching for answers in the places he knew the least. The garage, the backyard, even the attic. He scoured every corner of their home, as if somehow Emily had hidden herself away to escape the world. The couple found solace in each other's quiet presence, but they both knew the aching emptiness would never truly go away. The days blurred into each other, and time seemed to stretch on indefinitely. In the days following Emily's disappearance, the local authorities launched a full-scale investigation. Police officers combed through every inch of the town, following leads, interviewing witnesses, and tracing Emily's movements from the moment she left her home to the last known sighting of her at the prom venue. They interviewed Michael, who was as distraught as the family, but his account of the night remained the same. He had seen her step outside for a breath of fresh air, but he never saw her return. For hours, there were no answers, just more questions. Questions that would lead to more dead ends. Rebecca and James spoke to reporters, hoping that by raising awareness, anyone, would come forward with information. But as the weeks turned into months, the media's attention waned. The once vibrant case became a cold file on a police desk, its headlines replaced by newer stories. The public's interest was fleeting, and Emily's disappearance began to slip out of the collective memory of the town. It was the ultimate nightmare for any parent. The world moved on, but their world had been frozen in time. The Davis family clung to the hope that one day they would receive the call that would bring their daughter back to them. As time went by, Emily's parents struggled to cope with the hollow ache in their hearts. They sought professional counseling, but no words could fill the void left by her absence. Rebecca often found herself visiting Emily's old bedroom, staring at the untouched prom dress hanging in the closet. She would sit on the bed, clutching the necklace Emily had worn that night, trying to make sense of it all. James, on the other hand, threw himself into work, hoping that keeping busy would distract him from the unbearable truth that his daughter was gone, and no one could tell him why. The family, once close, knit and full of life, was slowly unraveling at the seams, and no one knew how to fix it. Their grief began to manifest in different ways. Rebecca would bake Emily's favorite cookies, hoping it might bring some comfort, only to break down in tears when she remembered how Emily used to eat them right out of the oven. James, once a man of few words, started having vivid dreams about Emily, where she would look at him with pleading eyes, asking him for help. The frustration of being unable to solve the mystery of her disappearance consumed him. Both parents questioned themselves. Had they missed something? Had they done something wrong? The guilt, coupled with the haunting absence of their daughter, was a constant weight they couldn't shake. The case had all but gone cold. Emily's disappearance had become little more than a tragic memory in the town's history, a sorrowful event that lingered in the shadows of other unsolved mysteries. However, in the summer of 2005, nearly 6 years after Emily's vanishing, the story took an unexpected turn. A junkyard worker named Tony Hawkins, who had been employed at a local scrapyard for nearly a decade, unknowingly stumbled upon a discovery that would reignite the investigation and thrust Emily's case back into the public eye. Tony was a man of simple habits. He spent his days disassembling old cars, salvaging whatever parts he could sell, and scrapping the rest. The junkyard was a chaotic mess of rusted frames, torn seats, and broken glass. The kind of place where people brought their cars to die, their stories fading with the metal. On that particular afternoon, Tony was tasked with cutting through a seemingly ordinary sedan that had been sitting in the yard for months. The vehicle, a black Jeep Cherokee, was nondescript, save for the fact that it had been abandoned there under mysterious circumstances. As Tony removed the car's upholstery to salvage the foam for resale, something unusual caught his eye. A small, folded piece of paper was wedged deep inside the foam of the passenger seat. At first, Tony assumed it was just litter or a forgotten receipt, but something about the paper seemed off. It was too carefully folded, almost as if it had been placed there deliberately. Tony's curiosity got the better of him, and he gingerly unfolded it, revealing a cryptic message written hastily in blue ink. The words on the page immediately sent a chill down his spine. The message was short, but it was chilling enough to freeze him in place. "They took me. Don't trust the cops. I know too much." The handwriting was faint but legible, and Tony could make out the unmistakable panic in the words. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach as he stared at the paper. The words seemed like an urgent cry for help, a message from someone who had been trapped or held captive, but who? And why was it hidden here, in a car that seemed to have no connection to the case? Tony had no idea, but he knew one thing: this was no ordinary scrap of paper. Tony's first instinct was to toss the paper aside and forget about it. After all, he worked in a junkyard full of old, forgotten things. But something about the message gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this paper was somehow important. He took it to his supervisor, who dismissed it as the ramblings of a troubled individual, but Tony wasn't convinced. He couldn't ignore the fact that the handwriting seemed strangely familiar. Then it hit him. He had seen a news story years ago about a girl who had disappeared. Emily Davis. Her face flashed through his mind like a ghost, and the memory stirred something deep inside him. Tony decided to take matters into his own hands. He carefully preserved the note, bringing it to the police station the very next day. The officers, initially skeptical, were taken aback when they read the words. The handwriting was scrutinized, and it was determined to be consistent with the style Emily had used in some of her personal writings. This new development was enough to prompt the authorities to reopen the investigation. They couldn't afford to ignore it, not when a possible clue had been uncovered after all this time. The junkyard worker, once an anonymous figure in the story, became an unlikely hero, his simple discovery serving as a key to unraveling the mystery of Emily's disappearance. As soon as the police received the note, they knew this wasn't just another dead-end tip or prank. The words on the piece of paper were direct and unsettling. "They took me. Don't trust the cops. I know too much." What sent chills down their spines was the unmistakable implication that Emily had written this message, and that it had been hidden in her car. The same vehicle she had been driving the night she vanished. But the timing was just as unnerving. 6 years had passed. And yet the note had never been discovered until now, nestled within the foam of the car's passenger seat. How had it gotten there, and who had placed it there? The immediate question was, who were they? And why would Emily, in her desperate final moments, write a message warning against trusting the authorities? The police quickly realized that this note wasn't just a cry for help, it was a clue, but one wrapped in layers of mystery. The detective in charge of the case, Captain Derek Holloway, immediately launched an investigation into the note's origins. He had seen his fair share of strange cases, but this one felt different. This was personal. This was as though Emily was reaching out from beyond the grave, or at least from the shadows of her unknown captivity. Forensic experts were brought in to examine the paper, the ink, and even the way the note had been folded and hidden inside the foam. They confirmed that the handwriting matched samples from Emily's personal notes, found at her home before she disappeared. However, they couldn't determine when exactly the note had been written. It was almost as if Emily had known something would happen to her. Something that could lead to her disappearance. And she had made preparations in advance. The police began to theorize that Emily might have been held captive for some time, and the note was her way of leaving behind a trace for anyone who might eventually find it. As the investigation deepened, the more disturbing details began to emerge. The words, "I know too much," were particularly haunting. Had Emily stumbled upon something dangerous? Had she been involved in something larger, something that she had no business knowing about? It seemed as though the case of Emily's disappearance was far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The detectives revisited the few leads they had from the original investigation, but everything felt like a jigsaw puzzle with too many missing pieces. They began to question whether the disappearance had been a random act, or whether Emily had been targeted, because of something she had inadvertently discovered. Then came the realization that sent a ripple of terror through the teams. Who would have known about the note? If Emily had hidden the paper herself, there was no reason for anyone to find it, unless they had been in the car, unless they had been involved in the same events that led to her disappearance. This raised another layer of suspicion. The police began to explore the possibility that the person who had been responsible for her abduction, someone who had likely been following the case for years, might have planted the note, hoping it would be discovered eventually. What they hadn't expected was that the message would reveal more than just Emily's fear. It hinted at something larger, a web of secrets that went beyond what anyone could have imagined. The discovery of the note in Emily's car set the investigation on an entirely new path. Forensic experts continued to analyze the paper, confirming its authenticity, and matching the handwriting to other samples from Emily's personal belongings. But the police were left with a nagging sense of unease. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a carefully crafted breadcrumb. It seemed deliberate, as though Emily had been anticipating the moment when someone would find the note. The more the authorities thought about it, the more questions arose. Why had Emily left a clue so carefully hidden? And why had she written that she knew too much? What had she been exposed to in the days leading up to her disappearance? Detective Holloway, who had seen his share of cold cases, was suddenly struck by the realization that Emily's abduction was never random. The police had always assumed she was a victim of a chance encounter or an opportunistic crime, but now there were signs that suggested otherwise. The phrase, "I know too much," echoed in Holloway's mind as he delved into Emily's life in search of any hint of danger she might have encountered. Friends, teachers, classmates, everyone who had known Emily was questioned again. This time, though, the detectives weren't just looking for information about her movements that night. They were trying to uncover what had happened in the months leading up to the prom. What had Emily been involved in that could have made her a target? Through the investigation, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Emily had recently become close to a group of local teens who had ties to a small, but dangerous underground network in the town. While these individuals weren't involved in any overt criminal activity, they were connected to people who dealt in more illicit affairs. Emily's friends recalled that in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had become increasingly quiet and distant, often retreating into herself. She had mentioned several times that she had overheard conversations she shouldn't have, discussions involving shady dealings, disappearances, and unexplained violence. Emily had even confided in one of her close friends that she was feeling like someone was watching her. This, it seemed, had been the beginning of her downward spiral into danger. As Holloway dug deeper into this network of acquaintances, he uncovered a chilling fact. Several of the people Emily had become associated with had mysteriously disappeared in the months before her prom night. It seemed like one thing led to another, like a web of secrets being slowly uncovered by Emily's curiosity. She had been close to uncovering something much larger, something far more sinister than anyone had suspected. This discovery raised even more unsettling questions. Was Emily's disappearance linked to these other missing persons? Had she become involved in something dangerous that ultimately led to her abduction? The idea that Emily had unknowingly walked into a trap set by powerful individuals was becoming increasingly plausible. Meanwhile, the note left behind in the foam of Emily's car became a symbol of just how carefully planned her abduction had been. The paper had been hidden in a way that suggested the perpetrator had known exactly where to look. Inside a part of the car that would likely be torn apart and discarded, yet where the note would remain unnoticed for years. It made the investigators wonder, was this a message from Emily, or was it a deliberate piece of misdirection? Had someone planted it there to make the authorities believe Emily had known something? And if so, was this clue really meant to be found? Or had it been placed with the hope that it would lead to more confusion and misdirection? As the investigation into Emily's disappearance progressed, it became clear that the case was far more complex than anyone had originally believed. The discovery of the note had exposed a tangled network of secrets, and each layer peeled back only seemed to reveal more darkness lurking beneath the surface. Detective Holloway, now leading the case with a renewed sense of purpose, began to uncover disturbing connections between Emily and several people who had been operating in the shadows of the town for years. It was as though Emily had inadvertently stumbled upon a series of well-guarded secrets that were far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. One of the most shocking revelations came when Holloway looked into the history of a local mechanic, Greg Thompson, who had once worked on Emily's car just weeks before she disappeared. Thompson, known for his quiet demeanor and unassuming personality, had a reputation for fixing cars at a fraction of the cost of other mechanics. He was well liked by customers, though few knew much about his past. But as Holloway dug deeper into Thompson's background, he uncovered a series of unsettling ties to criminal organizations. Thompson had once been arrested for possession of stolen goods, but had always managed to escape serious charges. He had connections to several unsavory characters in town, some of whom had been involved in the disappearance of other local residents. The more Holloway uncovered, the more he began to wonder if Emily's disappearance wasn't just about her. It was about something much larger. Her curiosity about the people she had become involved with, her suspicions of their activities, and the conversations she had overheard in the weeks before her disappearance all pointed to the possibility that Emily had gotten too close to a criminal syndicate that had been operating undetected for years. The note she had written, warning against trusting the police, seemed to suggest that she had realized the gravity of the situation just before she vanished. But who was she trying to protect, and who had wanted her silenced? It was becoming increasingly clear that Emily had been caught in the crossfire of a much darker world, one where people were willing to go to any lengths to protect their secrets. Her newfound knowledge had put her in the crosshairs of individuals who operated in the shadows of society, individuals whose wealth and influence allowed them to manipulate the system and escape justice. The police, who had once believed Emily's case was a random act of violence or abduction, now had to confront the possibility that they were dealing with something far more sinister. A conspiracy that reached deeper into the town's underworld than anyone had imagined. With every new lead, the web of deceit grew larger and more intricate. Holloway began to suspect that the people involved in Emily's disappearance weren't just acting alone. They were part of a larger, organized group that had been using their power and influence to silence anyone who threatened to expose their activities. Emily had unknowingly walked into a trap, and her desire to uncover the truth had made her a target. What had started as a simple investigation into a missing teenager had now evolved into a race against time to uncover a vast network of corruption and deceit. And the deeper Holloway dug, the more dangerous the stakes became. As the investigation progressed, Holloway began to piece together a chilling picture of Emily's final days. She had become increasingly paranoid, afraid that someone was following her. She had started avoiding certain people, even some of her closest friends, and had grown more withdrawn. It was clear that Emily had known something was wrong, something was hidden beneath the surface of her seemingly idyllic life. And now, as the police began to close in on those responsible, it was clear that Emily's discovery of the truth had cost her everything. What remained was a tangled web of secrets, lies, and danger, and Holloway was determined to uncover it all, no matter the cost. As the investigation neared what seemed like its breaking point, the case took an unexpected and sinister turn. Captain Holloway, still haunted by the cryptic note left in Emily's car, was combing through the old files when he came across something that made his blood run cold. A forgotten report buried deep in the department's archives. The file, dated from the night of Emily's disappearance, contained details of an old car accident that had been dismissed as a simple hit and run. The crash occurred just a few miles from where Emily's car had been abandoned. A pedestrian, who was never identified, had been struck and left for dead in the road that night. At first glance, the accident seemed unrelated, but as Holloway read the report, a chilling possibility began to emerge. The report contained details of a witness statement, vague, but alarming. The witness had described seeing a black Jeep Cherokee speeding away from the scene of the accident. The description matched Emily's car, which was the same model and make of the vehicle she had been driving on prom night. The police had dismissed it as an unrelated incident, too minor to be of any real concern, but now, 6 years later, Holloway couldn't shake the eerie coincidence. The witness claimed to have seen a man standing near the accident site, but no one had ever come forward to corroborate the story. It was as if the night had swallowed him whole, leaving only more unanswered questions. Holloway's mind raced with possibilities. Could Emily have been the one to witness this hit and run? Had she stumbled upon something that night, something she wasn't meant to see? The more Holloway thought about it, the more he was convinced that the crash wasn't just an accident. It seemed as though the hit and run had been carefully orchestrated to silence someone, perhaps Emily. It wasn't just about her disappearance anymore. It was about the powerful forces that had been pulling the strings from the shadows. What if Emily had seen something that she wasn't supposed to? What if she had been the one to identify a crucial figure in the criminal organization, and her discovery had put her life in jeopardy? Holloway immediately began retracing the steps of the case, re-interviewing everyone who had been involved that night. He spoke again to Michael, who had been Emily's date, hoping to find some new detail he might have missed before. Michael, despite his grief, remembered a strange interaction that night just before Emily had vanished. He recalled seeing a man, someone he had never seen before, standing near the parking lot where Emily had stepped out to get some air. The man had been watching her closely, as if waiting for her to make a move. Michael had assumed he was just another prom goer, but now, in hindsight, the man's presence felt far more sinister. Was this man the same person who had been involved in the hit and run? Was he the one who had been watching Emily all along, waiting for the perfect moment to act? Further investigation into the hit and run victim revealed even more startling connections. The deceased man had once been a low-level informant in a series of organized crime investigations. He had been involved in activities that directly intersected with the criminal network Holloway was now investigating. The realization sent shockwaves through the investigation. Emily's disappearance, the hit and run, and the cryptic note were all tied together in a way that no one had anticipated. It was as if Emily had uncovered a secret so dangerous that it had cost her life. She had unknowingly become entangled in a much larger conspiracy, one that had its roots deep in the town's criminal underworld, and it seemed that those who controlled it would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. With these new revelations, Holloway felt the weight of the case pressing down on him. Every new lead he uncovered only led to more questions, more tangled webs of deceit. The deeper he dug, the more the investigation revealed a horrifying truth: Emily had known too much. She had seen something she wasn't supposed to, and in doing so, she had sealed her own fate. Holloway couldn't help but wonder if the authorities had missed something crucial all those years ago. Was Emily's abduction a carefully calculated move to silence her? And if so, was the truth about what had really happened that night still out there, buried beneath a mountain of lies? As Holloway stared at the files laid out in front of him, a sense of dread washed over him. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the truth, as he now understood, was more horrifying than anything he could have imagined. Emily had unknowingly crossed a line that put her in the path of people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. She had paid the ultimate price for discovering the dark underbelly of a town that many believed was peaceful, untouched by corruption. But even in her disappearance, Emily had left behind a legacy, one that would not be forgotten. The discovery of the note, the strange connections, the hidden truths. It all pointed to something much bigger than anyone could have predicted. And even though the investigation had dragged on for years, it had brought the secrets of those responsible into the light. The question remained, though, would justice ever truly be served? Holloway knew that no matter how much he uncovered, some things would always remain hidden in the shadows, buried by those who feared the truth being exposed. The story of Emily Davis wasn't just about a girl who vanished on her way to prom. It was a story about the power of silence, the danger of knowing too much, and the price that some were willing to pay to keep their dark deeds concealed. And while the police may have uncovered some of the mysteries surrounding her disappearance, they knew the full truth might never be fully revealed, not without consequences. But Holloway couldn't help but believe that, in the end, Emily had achieved something in death that she never could have in life. By leaving that note, she had forced the darkness into the light, forcing everyone to take a hard look at the truth. And for the first time in years, Emily's family could hold on to the hope that, somehow, her voice, her last desperate cry for help, had been heard. As the investigation continued, the secrets of the town slowly started to unravel. But for Emily Davis, the girl who vanished on her way to prom, her final message would echo forever in the minds of those who sought justice. Her story would never be forgotten, and in the end, that might be the only thing that truly mattered.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.